Right, well, good afternoon, everyone. For those of you that maybe don't know me, my name is Ian Baird, and along with Isla, I'm co-chair of UHMLG, and I'm chairing these the afternoon sessions. So, welcome back, everyone. I hope you had a lovely lunch. If not, well, frankly, we don't care. But I realise I forgot to do maybe some of the basic housekeeping rules for this afternoon. So I should point out the toilets are just over there, and if there is a fire alarm, I will be leaving by the doors behind me. For the rest of you, well, that's up to yourselves entirely. Just to remind you a few of the housekeeping rules. During the presentations, if you could just make sure that your audio is switched off. And please do keep tweeting using the hashtag. And if you've got any questions for the speakers, if you put them into the chat box, we'll pick them up there and address them to the speakers at the end of that. I was also going to ask you to, if you can, to make sure that you've got your, under the participants list, that you've got your full name. That's for the prize draw that we're going to do later on for the systematic searching book that we're giving away. We've got 5 copies of that to give away. If you go to the participants list and hover over your name, one of the options that you can choose from will be to rename to your full name. So if you could do that, that would help with that. I think I've done the housekeeping arrangements. So we've had some fantastic presentations this morning, so I think what we'll do now is, if Judy is ready, we'll just about to crack on with that. If I can introduce the next speaker then, is Judy Wright, is a Senior Information Specialist at the University of Leeds. Judy's been collaborating on systematic reviews and teaching search methods since 2002, initially with the Cochrane Schizophrenia Group, and then for Leeds Institute of Health Sciences. Judy manages a team of information specialists to support a range of systematic review types, including rapid qualitative economic modelling and realist reviews for projects funded by various different bodies like NIHR, MRC, ESRC and charities. So Judy's going to give us a few tips and tricks of the trade on sharing and remembering everything about systematic review searching. So Judy, if you're all set, I will pass over to you now.
Thank you, Ian. Hopefully you can hear me okay.
I can certainly hear you fine, thank you, yes.
That's great, lovely. Okay, I'm going to share my screen to get the PowerPoint presentation going. Okay, hopefully you can see that. So hello everyone, and welcome to my talk. I'm talking to you from the outskirts of North Leeds at the moment, which is very close to the beautiful Yorkshire Dales. So I thought I'd just start with a slide of sort of what's in the hills beyond. It's very exciting to do a talk like this, my first video conference. Yeah, very exciting. Okay, so I'm going to talk about 2 different things really. One is I want to share with you some tips, some really practical tips for when you're doing systematic review searches. I'm aware that we've got a really mixed audience here. We've got people from all over the world and people who are very new to systematic review searching, and also some long-time searchers, people with great expertise. So I'm also going to talk a little bit about how me and my team over the years have managed to share our knowledge between us and try and build up our expertise and develop quite a consistent approach to our searching service. And I hope that'll be interesting to you, but I also hope that with all this expertise we have in the conference, that maybe we'll get some practical tips coming from you guys as well. I'm very aware that some of my tips you might have some better ways of doing things to me, so I'm all ears for that, very interested to hear about that. Okay, so how the session's going to go is, first of all, I'm going to go through some of these practical tips. And as I'm doing that, that will give me an opportunity to show you the wiki which we are using to kind of capture and remember the learning that we're getting. Because we find that with every systematic review that we do, you learn something new. And over time, I mean, as Ian said at the beginning, I've been searching for studies for reviews for about 18 years now. So over time, that knowledge fades and you want to kind of keep hold of that. I'm then going to think about really all that knowledge that we have been generating for ourselves and our teams over those years, and how we get that and how we try and remember that. And then I will explore a little bit of our wiki to show you how we're doing that in Leeds. And then finally, I'll talk a little bit about things that we've learned in setting up and using our wiki, which may be helpful to you if you're doing something already which is similar, or you're planning on doing this. Okay, so in order to give you a few practical tips, I thought I'd just focus on a few key features of a systematic review search and give you a few tips on those. It's by no means comprehensive, but 3 areas which are really important for our searches are to have fully reported search methods. So I'm going to share some techniques that we use to help with that. It's also really important that we search several databases and sources. We're trying to limit bias. So again, I'll share a few tips on how we try and choose databases or sources. And then finally, I'll look at a few different tips we have for managing large records, downloading records into reference management packages and so on. Okay, so first up, saving searches, which is really important for transparent search methods. So as I'm sure you're all very aware, and it became quite clear from Jane's presentation earlier, we have to save full details of all the searches that we do, and ideally we want those presented when the review is published. So we want to know every single source that we've searched, the full name of it, the host name, the coverage dates, the date that we've searched that source, and it's helpful to know what we found there, how many records we found, and for our own personal use, it's useful to have maybe some notes about what happened with that search as well. So my first bit of advice is to keep one table per systematic review that you do, that you list every single search in that you're doing. Whether or not you find something from that search doesn't really matter, but just make a note that you've actually searched that particular source and the day that you did it, and some key details for that. So just displaying an example one here, we've got some databases in there, and we've got some websites as well at the bottom. The next thing to do is to save your search strategy as soon as you've written it. And I mean, if you're logged into a database which allows you to save your search in their account, then you can do that. But I would say, as well as saving a search in an account, save it as a Word file as well. Because accidents happen, things go wrong, and over the years we've lost searches that have been saved in accounts. So sometimes they're deleted, sometimes they just disappear, or sometimes you name a search in a way that you know later on, a few months later, you just can't find it. So it's just a backup. So you've always got a Word document style copy of your search strategy. If you need to rerun it at any point, you can copy and paste that. And also, it means that when you come to write up your search, those methods that you're writing up at the end of the review, you've got those search strategies to hand. You don't want to be looking for those strategies 6 months or 12 months after you've actually done the search. And finally, it's really important to report the full database name and host and the coverage dates of your sources that you're using clearly. And I'm going to just give you a screenshot of one of our wiki pages that we found really useful over the years to help us specifically with this. Because as you're probably aware, all the different databases have slightly different names, and there's lots of different hosts, and they cover different different date ranges. So we have one sort of standard list that we can all access that has all of the databases that we've searched, and our key websites, so we can just copy and paste from this list whenever we are writing our search methods, and we know that we've got a good quality reference to that database name. The only thing we might need to change at this point is the end date that the database is going to. So we just have a double check of what that end date is, or the date that we searched, to pop in there. Okay, second set of tips is about choosing databases, using several databases to limit our bias, and we need to search as widely as possible for our systematic reviews. But when you discuss this within your research team and with colleagues, you can quite often get quite a long list of databases that people would like you to search, and people are very helpful finding lots of sources. And it may not be feasible for you to look at 15, 20, 30, 40 different sources. So you need to prioritize them. So our guidance is to work with your researchers and your colleagues to develop a priority list. So you've got a small number that you definitely want to search, some the key databases that must be in there. And then you've got an optional list. So if you have time, you can work through those extra sources. When you're looking at which sources to search, we go to published guidance, and we look at studies, evidence that other information specialists and researchers have put together when they've had a look at what are the best sources to use for a particular topic. So that's always really useful to do that research to begin with. But there isn't that research for every single topic that you're going to come across for your reviews. It may be, like me, if you've been doing this for a long time, that you remember you've done a review many years ago, and you want to go back and see what you used then and take some, try and remember what was useful at that point and maybe what wasn't useful. So that's something that we're using the wiki to do over time. And finally, a way that we use to try and choose databases and maybe distinguish between one or two different databases is to do a test search in a group of databases. So if you've got access to something like ProQuest or EBSCO, where you can search several databases at one time, what you can do is do a very specific search where you search just in the title field for your review topic, but perhaps just a phrase which kind of captures your review topic really well. So in this example, it was a review about care farming, and the words green care and care farming are really key, and they really indicate that a paper with those in the title is relevant. So we did a search across several databases in ProQuest just for green care or care farm in the title, and as you can see on the left hand side, we have a breakdown of how many records were found in each of those different databases. And if, for example, I'd only really feasibly got time to search one social science database, then I would perhaps choose sociological abstracts over ASIA in this case, because it seems to have more relevant records. You might want to test that thoroughly. You might want to have a look at those records which are coming out as well, but that's one way of quickly looking across a large range of databases and getting a feel for where the literature is. Okay, this is another example of a wiki page. So we are collecting resources here and knowledge about doing searches for philosophy and ethics. And over the years, I've done a couple of reviews. So it's really sort of every 3 or 4 years, I get contacted to support a systematic review of ethics, and it's always a big learning curve to go into a new sort of field and learn which are the good sources for that. So recently I did this, and I thought, well, I'm going to capture all this information so it's there for next time. I found a good article explaining and giving advice on doing searches in ethics, and the Phil Papers resource was recommended to me by a reviewer, so made a note of that and kept that in. And also you'll see, as well as the subjects sources here, I've got some search tips and download tips that I've recorded. So the searching was very similar to what I've done before, and the download tips were important because EndNote, the export from to EndNote was quite unusual from this website. So I had to kind of figure out how to do it, that the instructions were not terribly clear and it wasn't intuitive. And eventually I worked out I had to type in the exact number of records I'd found to enable it to actually export them. Any other option didn't work. So it was important to capture that, to remember that for next time, because I would, you know, forget that within days or weeks. Okay. So now moving on to our final set of tips, and that's on managing large downloads of records. And I'll talk about EndNote quite a bit in this presentation, just because that's the software package that we use most of the time. But I think these tips are probably pretty transferable to any other reference manager. We've found over the years that the safest option when you're exporting records is to do the two-stage process. So you download your records into a file, you save a file of your records, it's perhaps a RIS file or a text file, and then you upload that into EndNote. I prefer that to a direct export into EndNote. So the direct export is obviously it's much quicker, but there are a few issues with that. So again, if something goes wrong at some point, and it might not be when you're doing the searches, it might be 6 months down the line, if the EndNote library becomes corrupted, or if it's lost, or if it's damaged, or if somebody's just mistakenly done some things, and you think actually it's going to be easy if we start again with this EndNote library, then it's very easy to recreate an EndNote library if you've already got all the files saved, ready to just import again. So that does occasionally happen, and it's nice and quick and easy if you've got those files saved. So it's a long process rerunning those searches again. Another reason for doing it is in some databases, such as in Ovid Medline, when you download a text file of references in certain formats, you get the search strategy with it. So you're saving time, you're doing two jobs at once. Now you're saving your search strategy at the same time as you're saving your references, and you get a good, you know, you capture everything that's happened at that one time to report later. My next tip is about how you label or name the files which you're downloading. So if you're doing this two-stage process, you need to know which database those files are coming from, because when you're importing them, you might have to change import options to make sure that those files are read correctly. So I always name my file with the name of the database, the source that the references are coming from, and I also add in the number of references which I've found, and I found this is really useful. So for example, in this search on AKI, I found 935 references. So when I go to EndNote, and I download all my references first from different databases, and then later I go into EndNote and import everything in one go. When I'm importing them later, I know that there should be 935 references going into my EndNote library. And if any more or any less appear, then something's gone wrong with my importing or with my saved records. Because what I found years ago was I would import records, and sometimes maybe just 10 would appear or 100 would appear, and I'd get some seeds of doubt in my mind and think, did I really just find 10? I thought it was a lot more than that. You'd have to go back to your search and check it and maybe rerun it, and that all takes time. Finally, a really general tip is to push your reference management software to its limits. It's really, really powerful software. It can do so many different things for you, but you have to invest time in exploring it. It can save a lot of repetitive and a lot of dull tasks, like removing duplicates and like improving the quality of your references. So it's very much worth investing the time. I just wanted to quickly show you our EndNote sort of landing page on our wiki, you'll see there's all kinds of different links to further wiki pages where we've got some very specific instructions for doing tasks in EndNote, but also some links which are very much related to our own working within the university and within our team. So the names of files within shared folders that are useful, how we can access EndNote at home if we're part of the University of Leeds. So this shows that the wiki isn't just about our own professional methods, it's all about how we work as well within our team and within our institution. Okay, so that's just a few tips from a few areas, and I've shown you 3 wiki pages, and we've actually got 126 wiki pages. We don't use them all. So that's just really a tip of the iceberg, and using this presentation, or developing this presentation, has been really interesting for me, in that I've reflected back and looked at our wiki to see the kind of information that we've been collecting over the years, because it's been a gradual process. And we have 2 sorts of information. So we have our professional search methods knowledge in there, and we also have our institutional knowledge in there as well. And looking at all that information, it seems to fall into 2 types. So there's some very frequently used information that we're accessing all the time and rarely used. And the frequently used information is often to do with knowledge that you need at the point of writing a search, of developing search strategies. We've got a nice page full of truncation symbols and wildcards for all the different databases that we search. So that's a really handy page to have open when you're doing a search and you can't remember exactly which truncation symbols are used in which situations. And that's the kind of thing that you just can't keep in your head. Well, I can't keep in my head all the time. For the sort of the rarely used information, so an example here is processing interlibrary loans. I mean, once you've done that a few times and you've gone through the process, you will be aware of how to do it, and you probably won't need to go back to the wiki. But we found that if we have new staff coming along, it's a good training material. And also if people maybe go away on maternity leave or away for a while on leave and then they come back, it's a great way to refresh your knowledge. And whilst I've been reflecting on the wiki, I've been trying to think about where we get our knowledge from and how we generate it, and then where we store it. This is quite personal to me, but I would imagine most people are doing something similar. To develop sort of knowledge for systematic review searching, I've done a lot of reading over the years of articles and research that people have done, guidance, handbooks that people have produced. I've gone on lots of training courses, and a lot of it's been from sharing with colleagues, working on the job, and also the fantastic mailing lists that we have, Expert Searcher, List Medical, Twitter. I've learned so much from there, and we're using the wiki to sort of grab and get some of the really good tips that come out from that. So we've got them for the future, but also we're all learning by mistakes and by just figuring things out ourselves. So that's really how we've been generating the knowledge. And then over the years, I've sort of been saving it in all kinds of different places, like my own personal folder, or shared folders with colleagues, had big long lists of web bookmarks, an EndNote library full of articles, plus folders full of PDFs, sticky notes, notice boards, you name it. There's been stuff in lots of different places. And as I started to develop my own team at Leeds, it became apparent that really wasn't gonna carry on very well, and that I needed to share my knowledge. They were bringing some brilliant knowledge themselves to the team, and we were trying to get a very consistent approach. So at that time, quite a few years ago, we started to develop a wiki, and we're using PBworks Wiki, which was freely available, And I mean, there's lots of other software available, and it may be that you find something like SharePoint now might be useful for this as well. I'll be doing something similar in that. So yeah, I have to first of all thank Thomas Veal, an information specialist who was working with me at the time. It was his idea. He got us started using it, and it was a slow start. It took us quite a few years to really get going and getting a full wiki going. But other information specialists along the way, so Kirstine, Rothio, Donna, Naila and Natalie, I need to thank them for their contributions as well. We've really tried to focus in our wiki on very practical tips for search methods, and because we've done such a range of reviews over the years, that's kind of grown and grown. But also we've wanted to signpost to the key handbooks and the key articles and research which has come out. So we've got links to that as well, but we're trying to distill that information. And alongside all of that, we're also having some very internal documents and instructions of how we actually do the work within our team and within our institution. Okay, so that's sort of the slides and introduction for now. What I'm going to do is see if I can hopefully switch to the wiki itself. And here we go. Hopefully you can all see the wiki. I'm just going to go back to the main page, but you can see there are our truncation pages. And I'm going to just talk through a little bit about the structure of the wiki and what it looks like and how we use it. So we've got a few tabs across the top. Just to say to begin with, it doesn't look terribly pretty. The colour schemes are a little bit gaudy, and there's not an awful lot you can do to make it look beautiful, but we try and keep it sort of clear and you know, practically useful as possible. So along the top we've got our wiki tab, our pages and files, where we've got a whole list, so you can go directly to lots of different files if you want. Don't really use that. And then we've got a tab for users, and it's very easy to add a new user from here. You just click on your users and give the email address of that person. They will be invited and can have various different access rights to the wiki. And then in the settings, there's not a huge amount you can do. You can change the colours and you can change the security. So you can either make it available for anybody to look at, or for just the people who you've invited to the wiki can look at it. Okay, so if I go back to the wiki and just show you, excuse me, the structure of it. So we've developed some shortcuts to key pages, and we've tried to create pages for certain areas that we think are important, but it has evolved a bit, so this isn't perfect by any stretch. If I maybe show you the search filters, lists and links. So we've got this first page with kind of main areas that we're looking at. If I click into search filters, I've then got a second page which is listing lots of different areas where there's some search filters or limits, and from that these go into individual pages. So if I click on the child and adult limits one, the kind of information we've got in here is very sort of specific. Okay, so how do I limit my Medline search to adult studies or child studies? And we've got that for a few different databases, PsycInfo and Embase and CINAHL. So and you can see it's not perfect. We've got things in different colours. We've got a bit of a strange spacing going on, and what I've been trying to impress on people who are using this and the way that we use it is it's very much quickly adding some key information in there and not worrying about how it looks or whether it's complete or whether it's perfect or not. I'd much rather people get stuff into the wiki that we can refine later than be sort of frightened of putting it on because they haven't actually got the time to format everything correctly. Okay, if I just go back to the next part.
can I, while you're pausing, Judy, could I ask you to maybe increase the size of the screen a little bit?
It's at its maximum.
All right, okay, that's fine then. It was a couple of comments that it was difficult to see, but if it's at its maximum, then that's fine.
Yeah, I'm wondering if I can.
Oh yes,
yeah, I'm zooming in a bit. So yeah, it's very small. Sorry about that.
That's fantastic. Thank you.
Yeah, the text is small, but I've just zoomed in. Okay. Right. So yeah, go back. I'll just go back to. I'll just show you down here. So other things that are not quite right, but I'm not worried about. So here we've got, there is a page on outcome measure filters. We haven't linked it from this page yet, so we've just forgotten to do that. We will do that at some point. We can always find it through the search option. So, so yeah, that's just an example. And in our grey literature page, which is very much under development. We've got some nice sources there for dissertations. For guidelines, Natalie started adding some things that she's seen, but she hasn't by any stretch sort of finished this, and she's just put a little note there saying I need to add more later. So we've got little notes to ourselves in there as well. Okay. So the searching function is really the useful thing. The structure that we've got, we started off with seemed to make sense, but actually we don't really use that very much now. If we want to find any pages, we use the search box, which is at the top right-hand side. And that works really well. It just looks for the word that you type in within the title or the main body of the text. So supposing I want to find our information about searching and downloading from clinical trials databases, registers. I started to type in clinical trials, and some options came up, and here we have now our clinical trials page with some information about different registers. So useful things like when you're searching, you need to use capitals for the Boolean operator, and the wildcard operator isn't working, that kind of thing. Okay, the other one I wanted to show you, which I've shown you briefly already before, but it's really nice, is our database names page. So I always just start to, I know that that's what it's called, database names, that's what it's about. So that's my search that goes in there, find my database names, and as you can see, this sort of goes on and on with all our different Ovid search names, standard names for things in the Cochrane Library, Web of Science, and so on. It's very easy for us just to copy and paste those into our search methods and be confident that we've done it correctly. Okay, I was going to just show you very briefly how you add and edit to it, because that's very easy. So you click on when you're on the page you want to edit, you just click on the edit button, and it opens it up like any other sort of content management system. You don't need any coding knowledge for this. You're just typing in like a normal word processor. So just type in a little bit. You've got various options here where you can make your text normal. You can put bold and bullet points. It's the usual word processing facilities. And then to make a link, you would simply highlight the area, the text you wanted to link, and add link. And then the thing which is maybe a little bit less intuitive is that we have to select browse pages and files to really to get all the options to be able to add in a web address or go to or add a particular page or file. So we could perhaps insert this link here as so. Okay, I won't save that for now. Okay, so I'm creating a new page. Again, that's quite similar, though my little box is in the wrong place at the top for me to get to there. Let me see if I can scroll up there. I perhaps need to get out of, yeah, discard those. Yeah, so create a page is on the top right hand side. You put in your name for your page, And if you want, you can select a folder, you can have a folder structure, or you can just have it sort of loose hanging around. And it shows the same, it just shows you an empty page, and it's exactly the same as editing a page. You just start typing and inserting your links. Okay, so I'm going to go back to our presentation now. Let me just go here. And just to finish, last 10 minutes on looking at having some reflections on how we've found developing and using the wiki. So spoke to the information specialists who have been using it, and in many ways we're using it in a similar way, but we're all using it slightly differently as well, which is quite nice. We're all using it a lot, so we tend to use it between a few times a day to at least twice a week. We actually update it less often, so it's between 2 weeks and sort of every couple of months people are adding content to that. We're all finding the search toolbar to be the best way to navigate around it, and a few things we're using it particularly for. So often it's a case of just using it to double check your knowledge. So while people are writing search strategies, and they think they know how to do the adjacency or nearness searching, or the wildcard searching, they've got the wiki open just to double check that they are using N or near / or ADJ. They've got the right one for the right database. Also, staff have found it really useful when we're learning a new method. So we've recently been starting using Rayan a lot more for systematic reviews, and so we've got a page now where we're logging all our learning really about how we are using that, and the way that we're sort of saving searches and importing them, and that helps kind of consolidate our learning, I think, by using the wiki. Our most heavily used pages are the database full names, the truncation and wildcards, and also some of our sort of search limit and filter pages. So things like animals and age group searches, where we're trying to notch them out of our search strategies. Had some really good positive feedback from the information specialist team. We all find it really easy to use, very easy to add content to, and it is very intuitive. Like the fact that we've distilled quite meaty instructions into something which is very quick and simple to look at, and just really that it has saved us, or it feels like it's saving us a lot of time. It's very useful in our sort of everyday work. So there's just some kind of quotes and comments that I've had from the information specialists. And then on the not so good side, nothing serious, nothing to make us think this isn't worthwhile at all. Visually, it's not that attractive. And one thing which is a little bit, well, in some ways it's annoying, but in other ways it's very useful. So whenever you edit a page, everybody who's within that wiki, who's invited to that wiki, gets an email to say that you've edited that page and a kind of a brief description of what's happened. So if somebody's added something new to the page, and they've sort of got a new practical tip, that's great. That's really nice to know that that's been added to the wiki and that information is there. But if someone's just edited a page to get rid of something which is wrong, or some typos, there's been mistakes in there, just making it look a bit neater, you get emails about that as well. So that's not so useful. Some of the information specialists have found that creating and linking a new page is more difficult, is a bit of a fiddle. I think it depends how often you use it. I use it quite a lot, so I've got very familiar with that. But yeah, it is. It's not as simple as editing the page. And now some of the content is getting quite old and outdated, and we are very aware when we land on a page that we need to check when it was last edited. It does tell you, and also how we don't fully rely that everything is up to date. We're aware that this is a thing that we just need to keep updating ourselves. One thing which is fiddly is the page titles. Page titles are really important because that's how the hyperlinks work within the wiki. So you can move from one page to another based on linking the titles. If you name a page and then the content of that becomes quite different to what the page title says, you can't really change the title. If you do, then all the links break, and you'd have to rework all the links again. So that's a little bit of a fiddle. And the other issue we have sometimes is just finding the page. If you're not quite using the right words, as anything with a search, then it might be hard to find the page that you're after. But that's a very sort of rare occurrence, really. Here are some just basic details about PBworks itself, but there are, as I say, there's other wiki software. It's free, but there is a subscription version as well, and you can make your wiki available to the public if you'd like. However, you can only have 15 internal users and 5 external users. I would recommend, having sort of read the small print a bit, that they do say that they look after that your data is secure, and they look after it, but they can't guarantee 100% that your data will be fully secure. So I wouldn't add any confidential or personal data to this kind of thing. Okay, it's really important if you're going to set something up like this, or if you're using something like this, to get your whole team engaged, because you've got that opportunity there where everybody's bringing something to the team, everybody has experience, and we're all learning. With every single review we're doing, we're learning something new. So try and get everybody involved in planning the structure of it and the content. Give as much editing support and training as you can. See, it's quite easy to use, but it's always daunting to start off with something else. To learn a new piece of software is always daunting. So give that support. And what's worked well for us is that it's a very sort of internal wiki thing, which isn't going out to the wider world, so it doesn't have to look perfect, and people can very quickly, if they're busy but they want to capture something, they can just very quickly copy and paste it, and then we can sort it out later. Maybe encourage people on your team to write something that they know about, or that they're particularly interested in, to get them used to using the wiki. And when you're setting it up, try and move all that content that you've got buried in folders or in emails. Try and get all of that into the wiki, so there's one place where it all is, and you're not tempted to carry on in your old style of working. And when you get problems or you come across things you want to help people with, send them the links to the wiki, so that it just keeps reminding them that it's there. And we have found it really useful as a training resource for new staff, so it's helpful to get them involved. Okay, wider sharing. So we've talked about this a fair bit, about whether we can share this more widely, and what that would look like and how that would work. There are some issues. I mean, obviously with our PBWIC, we can only share with a limited number, and also the content is really mixed. So we have some of it's very much relevant to us at the University of Leeds, so there'd be content that'd be irrelevant to other people outside of that. And also we have this work in process field to encourage staff to use it and add to it. And I do worry, if we made it available, or if it had to be made available very widely, that might be a barrier for people to put things on there, because they felt they hadn't the time to make it presentable for the rest of the world. However, we have some really useful information on there, some really good content that we could share, and we felt as a team that just the idea of it and maybe the structure of it is worth sharing. There are other websites. There's some other information specialists who have got websites up sharing some really good information. We have a small website which has got some of our information on there, but if I go to my next slide, which is our wiki page on other wikis or similar things. So these, I'm sure you're aware of some of these, where people are pulling together really good practical tips and search guidance. The HDI portal, we use that quite a bit because it's a really good, well-researched source of information on different types of searching for different types of studies. So that's a very good sort of reference point for us as well. And Janneke Starks and Amanda Wanner have produced some really excellent web pages, which have which some of it's very similar to the stuff we've got in our wiki as well, and they are open for people to add to their web pages. So maybe that is the way to go forward, is to try and add to other people's portals as well. Okay, I've come to the end just about, so a few final thoughts about this. So I was asked to give a bit of a talk about challenges and barriers to systematic review searching and developing a service ready for that I kind of got over the years. And for me, one of the main barriers has been to try and keep up with everything and share that and within my team, especially as we've moved to be supporting so many different types of reviews and in so many different subject areas, and the software is constantly evolving. So it is a real challenge. And as I say, we're constantly learning with every review, and it gets a bit depressing that your knowledge fades and you can't remember that. So this wiki for us has been a really great resource where we've been able to pool our knowledge and learn from each other. And, you know, in some cases that's just been removing some of the really boring and repetitive tasks that we didn't know that you could do much better. But also just to really up our game and make sure that we are keeping on top of things as best really as we can. Okay, well, I'd like to thank you all for listening to me, and I'm very happy to take some questions now, so I shall hand back over to Ian.
Yeah, thanks, Judy. That was brilliant. Some really fantastic insights there into how that's developed. I've been just keeping an eye on the chat as I've been going through the few comments and questions, some of which I think actually you've possibly addressed in the course of your talk. But anyway, one of the first questions was round about the availability of the wiki. Is it available to anyone, or is it just by invitation? I think you didn't answer that though.
Yeah, we've got it set up so it's just by invitation, and there's a limit to how many people we can invite to it. And as I sort of mentioned at the end, that there is a lot of internal information. So yeah, there's a real issue with what we share. It may be that we can develop or kind of make a slightly different version of it that's more useful to share with others. But yeah, it's I need to think about how we could maybe share it more widely, or maybe just share certain parts of it.
Those other sites that you mentioned, are they all open sites as well? Yeah.
So those blogs by Amanda and Janneke, and yeah, they're all freely available and open, and they do have a few. You know, they have some good tips. I think ours is much broader in its coverage, but they've got some really core tips in there, so I'd recommend people have a look at those. Yeah,
that's great. What about keeping it up to date? There was, I think, a couple of comments that maybe that some of the as databases change and stuff like that, some of what might be on there might go out of date. Is there has someone got overall kind of like editorial responsibility for it?
No, no one's got. I suppose maybe it's me that's kind of overall looking at it. I probably look at it more than most, but it's very much a collective thing, and we update as we go along. And I think we're all very aware when we go into it that the information might be, quite out of date. Unless somebody's, one of the nice things about it is there's a date at the top when it says Judy last updated this a week ago or whatever. So you get a feel for how up to date it is, and we do just constantly keep updating it as and when we need to. Some pages on there are many years old, and if I went to them now, I know they're completely out of date. So I suppose within our small team, we can manage that, and we're aware of that. And that's another reason for maybe not sharing it as it is to a wider audience, because people might think we've got everything up to date. And if you're developing this within your own small teams, I think you can probably manage that and talk to each other, and you're probably aware that we've not done a search in engineering for 3 years, which is why that is so out of date.
I guess to use a local analogy, I guess that would be it. It's a bit like trying to paint the Forth Road Bridge.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it is that type of thing.
Yeah.
Yes. You talked about your use of EndNote. Just to clarify, there was a question: is it EndNote Web or EndNote Desktop that you use?
It's predominantly EndNote Desktop that we use, because we're using lots of different libraries. We're doing libraries for every different systematic review that we do, so that's quite difficult to manage through EndNote Online, and we're using a lot of the more advanced features that the desktop version provides. Yeah,
we could tell we had lots of librarians, because inevitably then there was a lot of discussion about the various bibliographic management software pros and cons. So
yeah,
but I think we'll leave that there.
Okay.
There was also a general question, I know it's one that I've been asked before about the students, is about how many results should I have for my search. I know that the answer always is kind of like it depends, but I wondered if there's any advice for anything that might be kind of like more helpful around about that.
Yeah, I'll give it a go. So yeah, in my trainings, when I talk about it, I try to get over the point about the question being really does determine the size of the results. So the largest search that I've done was for trials of childhood obesity, and obviously there's a huge number. I mean, the question was so broad, we had to find everything, and we got about 40,000 search results. We took duplicates out, and we still had about 25,000. So that kind of surprises people that it's so big. And then my most specific search was when I was in the Cochrane Schizophrenia group, and we were looking at gardening therapy. This was about this was a long time ago, and I think we found 10 possible studies. So anything between a few to tens of thousands is very possible. I think a lot of systematic review searches seem to be in the range of maybe 1,000 to 5,000 results after all duplicates are taken out. There's probably a good paper out there where somebody's done. I think every so often people do an analysis of searches and get some averages of what's coming out. But it really does depend on how specific your question is, and the importance of doing some scoping searching at the beginning, so you get a feel for that. And then if you realise you're heading towards the 25,000 number that you can't manage, maybe it's time to have a think about your search question. To get to make something which is more feasible and is still a valuable question.
Yeah, scoping search, it's another really good tip. Yeah. Not so much a question, more a comment, but a few people saying that what a great developmental tool that is for new staff or for staff who are new to systematic reviews, for them to be able to tap into.
Yeah, we found it really useful. And we've always sort of got a list in our heads of new pages that we would like to go on, but we haven't had time to write or particularly develop. So when new staff come along, that's quite a nice thing for them to start doing, is to develop some of their own pages that everybody wants there but just hasn't had the chance to get going with. And as I sort of mentioned before, if people are away on leave or you know, maternity leave, that kind of thing, it is quite hard to get back into the search. You know, there's so many different things to remember about the searches, about all the different databases, all the different ways that you would search and download. That having a very quick reference source to come back to is quite nice, just for that refreshing, you know, refreshing it.
Okay, I said thank you so much for those hints and tips. Really, really invaluable. Lots of positive comments coming through in the chat as well. So at that point, on behalf of everybody, thank you very much for your input this afternoon, Judy. Much appreciated.
Thanks, Ian. Thank you.
See you later.
Thank you.